Hi guys, this is Nicole from Cozy Cloud Knits. Today I'm going to show you how to make this really cute rainbow shaped pillow. It's about 12 inches by 12 inches in size and they work up really quick. So for supplies, you're going to need 4 different colors of size 7 jumbo yarn. There's more details about that in the PDF file. You're also going to need some polyfill and then a pair of scissors and a lighter. And that's if you're going to burn your ends together, which I always think is the cleanest way to do it. So for lengths, for color A, you're going to need about 5.5 yards. For B, you're going to need about 7.5 yards. For C, you're going to need about 8 yards. And for D, you're going to need about 11.5 yards. Okay, so let's get started. So to begin, you're going to leave about a long tail that's approximately 12 to 18 inches and you're going to create a slip knot. So drape that yarn over your hand and pull the working yarn through to create a slip knot. So your slip knot should be about 2 fingers widths wide, and then all of your remaining loops are going to be about 2 fingers widths wide as well. So we're going to chain 30. So your first slip knot was 1, then 2, then 3, 4, 5. You're going to continue doing that chain until you get to 30. You want to make sure all of your loops are about the same size, so try to make them about 2 fingers widths. Okay, so that's 29 and 30. Okay, so now what we're going to do with this chain is you are going to take your long tail end and you are going to put it through the last loop of your chain. So you're going to take it and you're going to put it through that 30th loop. And then what I want you to do is I want you to use the working yarn and I want you to pull on it pretty snug. You're going to end up losing a couple of the chains when you do this, but it's going to create a nice tight foundation chain so that your working yarn is able to build off of that and your tail yarn isn't going anywhere. So keep kind of pulling on the working yarn and the tail yarn to really tighten that loop um, so that it's secure. And then just make sure that the circle is not twisted at all. And I want you to put your tail end of yarn downwards because we're going to go back to that later. And this is where we're going to change the color to the next stripe in your rainbow. So take your working yarn and you're just going to cut it right at the base of where you pulled the yarn through. And then that is where we're going to connect our new piece of yarn for the next color. So to burn the pieces of yarn together, you're just going to clean up both ends. That way you can see the inner tubing. And then you're going to light the inner tubing of each piece of yarn. I usually do each piece just so that I know they're going to fuse together really well. And then once it looks like the tubing is melted, you're just going to press them both together carefully and squeeze that, like you'll feel the center. You want to squeeze it together so that you can feel the yarn fusing together. And that's how you know that it's secure and attached. Okay, so for round two, you're just going to knit your way all the way around into each chain space. So you're going to find that chain space. You can kind of use your fingers to feel for it. And you're just going to create your first loop in that first chain space. Make sure that each loop is consistently about the same size. I usually try to I make my loops pretty tiny, like 1 finger's width. You don't want it to be too loose because we are going to stuff this with the polyfill, and if your loops are too loose and they're not knit closely together, then you're going to be able to see that polyfill really easily, and you'll almost be able to like pull it out, and you don't want that. So you're just going to continue knitting all the way down the chain, and we're just going to keep working our way all the way around. So once you've made one of these and you have the pattern down pat, these actually work up really quick. I'm usually able to make one in about 15 minutes, which is great for if you do any markets or anything like that. You can make these in bulk. And I haven't actually taken them with me to a market yet, but I think that they would be great sellers, especially for people that are buying for babies or kids. So you're just going to continue knitting, and like I said, we're just doing one loop in each chain space, and you can kind of feel for your last loop there. It's kind of hard to tell, but there is one loop where the slip knot is, so it might look like there's a little bit of a gap in between. But you can always go back and just recount your loops to make sure you have 28 total. So since we're working in the round, I highly recommend using a stitch marker. I just use a safety pin, but I place my stitch marker on the last loop of my previous round. And that way I know that when I get all the way back around, if I if my last stitch doesn't fall on the stitch marker, then I missed a stitch. So for this next row, we're going to knit 6. And then this is where we're going to do an increase. So you're going to look in between the stitches, and since it's different colors, it actually makes it easier, but you're going to find the loop in the back um, from the color you're working in, and you're going to pull up a loop from there. So it's going to add an additional loop in between the two loops. And then you're going to knit 2, and then we're going to do another increase here. So pull apart those 2 stitches and find that yarn in the back. You'll see like a little, yeah, you'll see the hole here, and that's where you're going to pull up a stitch. So that's another increase. And now you're going to knit 12. One, 2, 3, 4, and continue until you get to 12. Okay, so this is what it should look like. And now we're going to do another increase. So find that blue or whatever color you're working with yarn in the back and pull up a stitch right from that little loop right in between. And then you're going to knit 2 again and do another increase. So find that yarn in the back and pull up a new loop in between. and then you're going to finish off by knitting 6. Now keep in mind your 6th loop should fall on the stitch marker. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here's my stitch marker. So this is going to be my last stitch of round 3. So there's 6. So now you're going to put that stitch marker back on the loop. That way you know where to end your next round. Okay, so now we're going to change to color C. So you're going to cut your yarn right at the base of your last loop from the last round. Make sure you get off any excess fuzz. And then you're going to take your new color and do the same thing. You're just going to cut off any of the excess fuzz on the end so you can see that inner tubing. And then do it the same way that we did before. So just light both ends of the yarn, trying to just focus on that inner tubing. And then you're just going to press them together and squeeze them to make sure that they're secure. Okay, so we're going to go all the way around again until we get to the stitch marker. So for row 4, we are going to knit 32, so there's not going to be any increases on this round. I want you to make sure that your stitches are all consistent sizes. Try to make them about 1 finger's width. Make sure that you're knitting them really close together. You don't want to have a big gap between your stitches, and that's going to create the nicest final product in the end if you're able to do it that way. And just keep in mind, this does take practice too to make your stitches nice and neat and even. The more you do it, the neater it will look. Okay, so just keep going until you get to that stitch marker. So that's 31, and here's my stitch marker, and this is also my last stitch. So this is stitch number 32. And you're going to put that stitch marker back on the last loop. You don't have to use a stitch marker. I just really like to. I find that it's very helpful to keep track of where I'm at. So for row 5, we are going to knit 7. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then we're going to increase here. So look for that loop in the back with the color of the yarn you're looking for, and you're going to pull up a new loop. So that's your increase. And then we're going to knit 2 just like we did before when we did an increase. And then we're going to do another increase here. So look for that loop in the back. And that's where we're going to pull it up. And now we're going to knit 14. Okay, so that was 14, so this is where we're increasing again. So then you're going to knit 2, so that's 1 and 2, and we're doing another increase. So find that area right in between the 2 stitches and pull up a loop. And then you're going to knit 7. 4, 5, 6, and there's my stitch marker, so that is going to be stitch 7. And that is also the last loop of your row 5. So this is what it should look like, and then we are going to change to color D. So just do the same thing that you did before to do your color changes. You're going to burn each piece of yarn and then just fuse them together and pinch it with your fingers to secure it. Okay, so once you have that yarn attached, we are going to do row 6. So you're going to knit 36 stitches all the way around until you get back to your stitch marker. So I just want to remind you too that if you have any trouble with the pattern or you have any questions at all, definitely don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can always email me, you can reach out to me on social media. I'm usually always pretty quick to respond, or I try to be anyway. So I do love helping people, and that's all kind of part of the pattern is me being available to help if you need it. Okay, so here's my last stitch of the round. So here is stitch number 36. And then I'm just going to place my stitch marker back on. And we're going to move on to our last row using the pink. So for row 7, we're going to knit 8. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And here we're going to increase again. So find that loop in the back, and that's where you're going to pull up a new loop. So increase and knit 2 again. And then we're going to do another increase. And then you're going to knit 16. Okay, so that's 16. And then you are going to increase again here. So find the loop in between and pull up a new loop. And then we're going to knit 2. And you're going to increase again. And then you're going to finish off by knitting 8. Okay, and here's my stitch marker. So this is going to be my last stitch of the round. And at this point you can just leave your stitch marker off, so you can just set that aside. Okay, so now what we're going to do is you're going to take that oval and you're going to fold it in half so that the long tail end is in the inner bottom right corner. And then here's your working yarn, and you're going to basically finish off your stitches to create the rainbow shape. So what I want you to do is I want you to take your last stitch from the previous round off, and then I want you to sandwich those 2 stitches together. Just so you can see here, you're going to take your working yarn and then you're just going to feed it through those 2 stitches sandwiched together. You're going to create a loop. These loops are all going to be bigger, so your loop should be about 2 fingers widths, sometimes even 3 depending on if it feels like your rainbow is pulling too much, but I usually do 2. So sandwich them together and create a loop that's about 2 fingers widths, and then you're going to do the same thing with your next 2 stitches. So now from here, you're going to finish off just like you would a regular chunky knit blanket. So you're going to take the loop on the right and place it over your loop on the left. And we're going to continue doing this all the way till you get to the end. So sandwich your stitches together, pull up a larger size loop about 2 fingers widths, take your loop on the right and put it over the loop on the left. So continue doing this all the way to the end. So pull up a loop, take the loop on your right and put it over your loop on the left. So this is what it looks like. You can see that pretty braided edge. This is going to create the top of your rainbow. So once you get to the end, you're going to continue doing the same thing, and I'm just going to show you how to finish off that end loop. So do the same thing, sandwich those 2 stitches together, pull up a loop. You can make it smaller, it doesn't have to be the 2 finger widths, and then pull it up and continue pulling it all the way through. And then you're just going to try to tighten it. Just be careful not to break the yarn here. And then once you tighten it, I usually just secure it onto that same color loop, and I just do another knot just to make sure that it doesn't open up. And then once I do that, I take the yarn, and you can either cut it or you can just tuck it right in the middle, and you won't be able to see that. Okay, so now that we are done with the outer edge of your rainbow, we need to close up the inner part. That way we can start to stuff it and close it off completely to make the rainbow shape. So you're going to take your polyfill, have that set aside, and what we're going to do is we're going to whip stitch the bottom closed, and then we're going to stuff it as we go. So your tail end yarn should be right at the very end of your rainbow arch. So then you're going to find the 2 stitches at the bottom that are directly across from each other, and you're going to whip stitch those closed. So to do your first whip stitch, you're going to sandwich 2 stitches together, and you're going to pull the yarn through. And then just kind of pull it tight. Then you're going to do the same thing again. So you're going to find the 2 stitches that are directly across from each other and put your yarn through, entering it from the same side that you did the previous stitch, and pull it tight. So do the same thing again, find your next 2 stitches, and then put your yarn through from the same side that you did from your previous stitch, and pull it through. So that's how you do a whip stitch. We're not weaving it in and out. You're entering the yarn from the same side and pulling it through. That's how you do a whip stitch. And just make sure you pull it nice and tight. That way it keeps it closed. You don't want any of the polyfill coming out. And it doesn't have to be perfect. So you don't want to be missing stitches, but if you end up stitching 2 together by accident twice, it's not a big deal. You're not really going to, it all blends in anyway. The important part is that you make sure you're not missing any stitches because you don't want any holes when you put the polyfill in. So now, like I said, as we go, we're going to stuff it so that you don't get to the very end and then you still have to stuff it, because it's going to be a lot harder to do it that way. And I usually like to stuff mine pretty dense. I like to make it, I don't like to make it too soft because then it doesn't hold its shape as well. So I add a decent amount of the polyfill as I go, and then I just continue going back to the whip stitch. So enter it from the same side and pull together. And I know you can kind of see the holes right now, but as you keep going, those are gonna close up and you won't have any issues. So enter it from the same side, pull through, and pull it tight. So see, as you pull it tight, it does close some of those holes up. So I'm just going to keep doing that. I'm going to do a few more stitches, and then I'm going to add more polyfill. Okay, so you just want to make sure you leave a big enough hole so that you can fit your hand in there. And then I'm just going to continue filling my rainbow so that way it's completely stuffed. And then once I'm done filling it and I feel like it's a pretty good consistency in terms of how much polyfill I added, then I'm just going to continue whip stitching it closed. So I feel like that's a pretty good consistency. So I have a few more stitches that I need to stitch closed. So I'm going to continue whip stitching. So pull it through again, and then I think this is probably going to be my last stitch here. So now it looks like it has a good shape to it. And then what I usually do is, as long as I don't see any holes in the bottom, and I've gone all the way down so that the whole rainbow is closed, then I secure it onto that same color. So I just do a knot right into the same color. Doesn't really matter where it is. And then once I'm done, I just push that tail end on the inside, and that is it. So I just want to remind you that I'm always happy to help in any way that I can. So feel free to email me, message me on social media, and I will do my best to help you. And as always, feel free to tag me on social media because I always love seeing your finished products and all the different color combinations that you guys come up with. So I hope you have fun with this pattern, and I can't wait to see what you create.